Knight Captain Aiden Vanta. My name is Knight Captain Aiden Vanta of the Dominion of Vera. This is my last note, my confession. We were transporting sensitive materials across the lower tiers of the wastes when we were ambushed by rogue elements of unknown origin. We don't know how they found our coordinates, or how they struck with such precision and power. What I do know is this. We are likely going to die here. If anyone finds this, I put these words out to my family and friends. We died on our feet. We've been here 22 days. We have been captured, and we are waiting. There is no end in sight. Mother, if you ever hear this, know that I love you. The same for Allie and Sam. I know you didn't want this life for me, but know that I did my duty until the very end. I was not afraid. Thank you to my friends, my family, and the knights under my command. May your mana burn ever bright. Knight Captain Aiden Vanta. The recording ended. A moment later, one of our captors entered the room. He was a massive man, scarred and brutal, his body marked by the telltale corruption of spell pollution that came from living too long in the wastes. His eyes glowed faint red, his presence radiating the kind of madness bred in battlefields that never stopped burning. The wastes had been the graveyard of nations for 3 centuries, lower-tier worlds, stripped bare by endless wars. Every time we crossed them, we prayed to the gods of Vera that luck would hold. This time, it hadn't. Most of our soldiers had been slaughtered in the initial ambush. The rest of us were dragged below ground. Only one among us seemed to matter to them. Professor Adeline, a ruin tech expert hiding under a false name. A genius in the manipulation and creation of lost technologies. She was supposed to be traveling as a humanitarian. They discovered her anyway. I believe she's the reason we're still alive. They can't decide whether to ransom her, use her, or break her. The scarred man sneered down at us, his voice like gravel. Your government has refused to negotiate on your behalf. You will be executed tonight, to prove that the raiders of Ikana are not to be trifled with. Ikana, a splinter group born of the fallen Yagatha nation 2 decades past. I thought them long dead. But looking at the red-eyed monster before me, the truth was obvious. They had nothing left but this cause. And yet, how did they know our route, our mission? How did they know about Adeline? Before I could think further, something changed. The raider leader's words cut off mid-sentence. His eyes went wide, his lips parted, and blood poured out in a sudden violent stream. A figure loomed behind him, silent and terrible. He wore Technica ruin armor, blackened and scarred, a mask shaped like a glowing necromantic skull. Its hollow sockets burned with violet light unlike anything I had ever seen. The stranger's voice was low, distorted, final. Bring the prisoners. I'm here to get you out. Shock held me still for a heartbeat. Then I scrambled to my feet, pulling Professor Adeline and the 2 surviving soldiers up with me. We followed. The rebel base ran deep underground, its halls fortified with ruin tech to hold back the poison of the wastes. But now its corridors were painted red. Bodies lay in rows where they had fallen, sliced apart with clinical precision. I forced myself to speak, my throat dry. What division are you with? How many are here in this rescue op? The skull mask turned toward me, violet eyes unwavering. I am no one, a ghost, he said. Nothing else. That was all. And for reasons I couldn't name. Those words chilled me more than anything the raiders of Ikana had done. I looked around at the bodies, dozens of them, killed with a blade, a fist, or a spell. It was hard to tell which in many instances. Where is the rest of the team? The skull-masked man turned his head. Only the violet glow of his eyes was visible, studying me intently. The mask held no expression or disposition. He remained silent. At last he spoke. I'm the only one here, we have to move. The words sank in. The only one here? 20 men dead, slaughtered without a sound, and I hadn't heard a thing. My pulse hammered, questions burning in my throat. There's no way. You couldn't have done all this by yourself. He didn't answer. He just raised a finger. 3 more rebels rounded the corner, battered aura armor clinging to their frames, jagged aura blades in their hands. My breath caught. These were aura swordsmen close combat specialists, if they were any good at their craft. This was going to be a fight. We were about to make noise. A whole lot of it. I looked around and picked up a discarded aura rifle near me. I checked the reservoir, then pointed, finger tightening on the trigger. Then a hand shot up in front of me. The skull mask. Let me. His mana flared, and I watched the change in his aura in real time. It was visible. I actually saw it coursing into his limbs, pooling at his joints, condensing at his feet and hands. It was so dense it shimmered in the air, impossible to miss. Then he moved like an aura bolt. He blurred with a crack of displaced air and was on them before I could blink. An aura blade materialized in his grip, Technica steel-shaped and made deadly through artful application of Kinetica and Fortis, two aura subfields that were notoriously difficult to master. There was no hesitation on his part. Two quick strikes, one carving through a weak point in the low-grade armor, another sliding under ribs. A third slash severed a throat. Two men dropped before their bodies even realized they were dead. The last rebel managed to raise his aura blade, mouth opening to scream, but he never got the chance. The skull mask was already behind him, blade buried in his throat. The man collapsed soundlessly. I stared, my bolt thrower still aimed uselessly. This was on par with, no, even higher than our most dedicated and well-trained soldiers. Hell, this was as good as if not better than any knight I had personally fought or trained with. I pulled tighter on my bolt thrower, wishing desperately that I had access to my own mana and at least one of my expressions. There were any number of things I could have said. Instead, I landed on, "Who the hell are you?" He turned and I realized the violet glow wasn't part of the mask at all. Those were his eyes. The violet was bleeding, actually bleeding into a bright crimson. "Try not to use the aura rifle if you can avoid it," he said. "Noise will bring the whole organization down on us, and I can't let that happen." He spoke as though I were cargo, a liability to manage. I clenched my teeth. Doesn't he know who I am? "I'm a knight captain of the Dominion Army, Aiden Vanta, son of the Duke of Vanta," I hissed. "I won't be baggage or a burden. Get this restraining collar off me so I can help you. I've got internal magic silent ones." He paused, again taking a moment to consider me. Then he pulled a ring of Technica cards from his belt, clearly taken from one of the guards he'd killed earlier. He pressed one into the lock at my neck. With a click, the collar fell away. Raw mana surged back into me like blood into a numbed limb. I checked my cores. They stirred, and my body hummed in response. I cycled mana through my meridians and felt my cores wake fully, tugging at my individual expressions. Aura, check. Arcanum needs cycling, but viable. My half-formed Sanatio core still there, though the interruption would cost me. Still better than expected. I didn't have a casting aid or a built-in Technica interface. Nothing to channel it but my mind and my understanding of my most familiar expression formulas. Raw casting in its most basic form. Dangerous, but powerful. If I didn't kill myself. I whispered the old words, formed the formulas for my most common battle spells, and projected them under my breath, picturing the circles, arrays, and runes that made up battle magic. My expressions did not disappoint. I felt the familiar tug of aura bolts waiting to be unleashed. Before I could ready them, the skull mask crouched and strapped a small casting aid around my wrist. A crude Ruintech gauntlet, patched and scarred, based on less developed technology that struggled to process multiple expressions properly. "Sit with that," he said flatly. "Raw casting is dangerous. This aid is old, but it handles aura well. Used correctly, it'll keep most of your aura projectile spells nearly silent. Don't oversaturate it. Keep your reserve and activation separate if you can. This thing isn't good enough to do that for you." I flexed my fingers, feeling the faint hum of unstable tech under my skin. "It'll hold," I muttered. But the thought dug in deep. Who is this man, who moves like death itself, and why the hell is he here? We followed him down the corridor, quiet, measured steps echoing in the stale air. I glanced back. The professor and the two soldiers limped along, pale but alive. The skull mask reached a corner and raised a fist, the universal signal to hug the wall. We obeyed instantly. He slipped forward, and I saw the brief flare of his caster's aid on his right hand as he whispered a word that bent the surroundings themselves. This was not Elementa. This was something deeper, an advanced arcanum application that suppressed presence and light. Shadows thickened around us, not gathering so much as forgetting we were there, until the wall seemed to absorb us whole. We held our breath. No fewer than 20 men marched through the crossroads ahead. Boots scraped, armor rattled, weapons glinted. Too many. Even with me and him, even if we tried, it would have been suicide. Maybe he could have handled it, but not without noise, and not without getting us killed. They passed. We exhaled as one. We kept moving, turned another corner, and then 5 more rebels, right in front of us. The 20 weren't far behind. Shit, we're dead. Our rescuer moved before I could even call upon my own expressions. 2 aura blades flickered into existence, gleaming steel with inlaid glyphs. He blurred forward, pumping the blades with such dense aura that it became visible again. 2 of the rebels reacted instantly, trained swordsmen, pulling extended aura blades from their belts with a flick of intent and a push of a button. For a heartbeat, it looked like they might put up a fight. I was very wrong. They blocked his first strike, but neither survived the second. His style was brutal and clean, lacking the flourish and wasted movement of dueling styles common in Vera. Everything he did was about brutal efficiency strikes to joints, to arteries, crippling before killing. Limbs severed, throats opened, men fell like broken machines. 5 rebels eviscerated in seconds. He didn't even slow. We pushed on through more tunnels and tense moments until suddenly daylight broke upon us like a heavenly concourse. The corridors ended, spitting us out onto what passed for a road. The wastes stretched before us, land corrupted by mana pollution, twisting the air and raising rocks into unnatural formations. The terrain looked both beautiful and wrong, flora bent by centuries of power storms and structural realignments. The ground itself appeared disjointed, like a boundary between Earth and the underworld. Still, it was good to be outside after a month of thinking we were going to die. The skull mask barely glanced at the surroundings. He didn't hesitate. He just kept moving, pace brisk but steady enough for the injured to keep up. 10 minutes later, we dropped into an open field between 2 jagged rock crevices, and there they were waiting. My men, the survivors. Most sat hunched, chewing on rations or strapping on battered tech. A few stood guard. Every head turned as we stumbled into the clearing. "Captain!" My second-in-command, Fangor Broken, strode forward. The half-orc was an ugly brute-scarred jaw, broken tusks, bulk like a siege tower but loyal to the bone. He grabbed me in a crushing embrace. "Captain, we thought you were gone." "It's damn good to see you, Fangor," I said. "But let's hug later. Status. Tell me what's happening." "We pulled as many men out as we could. No new casualties since the initial attack." He jerked a thumb toward the skull mask. "The ghost here got us clear." I froze. The ghost. I'd heard the name before. Everyone had. The ghost of the wastes. A legend. A mercenary who never failed a mission. Bound by a code no one had ever seen broken. Stories said he walked into impossible strongholds, through armies, through corrupted mana storms, and walked back out alive. He was said to be one of the most deadly arcane artists alive. An aura expert so advanced, he was considered a national-level asset or threat depending on who you asked. I looked at him differently then. No wonder he'd carved through 20 men in silence. No wonder he'd freed us. This was simply another day for the ghost. Unbelievable. I stepped forward. "Thank you. I don't know who—" He raised a hand, stopping me. Then his head tilted, as if listening to something only he could hear. Suddenly, his entire body lit with raw mana. Power flared off him in waves, violet energy crackling along his armor. "Incoming," he said, voice sharp as a blade. "Strategic aura and arcanum spells. Layer them with as much power as you can. Everyone defensive measures now." The sky screamed. Firebombs rained down, tearing the world apart in a storm of flame and thunder. The ground convulsed. Stone shattered. Smoke and ash swallowed the clearing in a single breath. I thought it was the end, barely getting up my version of a barrier spell, a combination aura and water elementa arcanum construct I had developed myself. Debris crashed down. Men screamed. The stench of burning earth and flesh twisted my stomach. And then silence. When the dust cleared, I saw him. The ghost. He stood at the center of the wreckage, mana pouring off him in violet torrents, a shimmering wall of force towering around us. The steel shield pulsed with converted aura, pumping through a tech I didn't recognize, one that seemed to exploit aura's reinforcement properties to their fullest. Cracks laced the shield's surface, but it held. It held against a shucking firestorm spell. A strategic bombardment arcanum that normally required at least 6 coordinated casters. The shield wasn't perfect. A few firebursts punched through. Men were down, wounded. But without that shield, we would all have been ash. I stared, stunned. Firebombing of that precision was nearly impossible to block unless you used reinforced shield arrays with multiple aura specialists layered together, constructs built for sieges. Yet he had done it with nothing but will, aura, and a single piece of unfamiliar tech. Just him, the ghost of the wastes, but then I saw it. Half his mask was gone, ripped away by the blast. Sparks still danced along the broken ruin tech frame, and behind it, his face, not the weathered features of a veteran mercenary. Not the scarred visage of a monster born in the wastes, A boy. He couldn't have been more than 18. I froze, the legend collapsing in front of me. The ghost of the wastes. Was a teenager?
Chapter 1. Elara. I can't believe it's finally happening. My brother is coming back from the dead. I stood with my grandmother at the hoverport, fingers curled tight around the strap of my satchel. The place smelled faintly of ozone and iron from the docking lines, the wide expanse of polished glass buzzing with anticipation. It had been more than 10 years. 10 years since I got sick and stayed home with Gran in our little provincial house. 10 years since my parents, my grandfather, my 2 uncles, their children, and my brother, Cale, boarded a transport bound for Boston Paradise. It was supposed to be a quick trip, a 2-day holiday at a riverside resort. But the transport never arrived. One of the safest forms of travel in the upper tiers, they'd said. It went down anyway. Wreckage scattered, lives lost, bodies never recovered. I lost almost my entire family in a single day. After that, it was just me and Gran. She kept her job as a public administrator for the Education Bureau, steady and reliable, and raised me the best she could. She was the one who pulled the strings to get me into the Arclight Academy system. I started high school just 3 weeks ago, and then everything changed. 6 months ago, a communication came from the Knights Order. They believed they had found my brother. He had been living in the wastes with no memory of who he was. Only recently, after being seen by a St. Lavelle healer, had fragments returned. They verified his identity through the arcane matchup registry. 3 weeks ago, the official confirmation arrived. And so now, here we are. My world turned upside down, waiting for the transport to dock, waiting to see my brother again. The brother I haven't seen in 10 years. The transport that docked was nothing special. It was neither a military ship nor a luxury liner, just a budget carrier. The kind that ferries workers, students, and families from place to place without ceremony or story. People streamed out in attired trickle-ordinary faces, ordinary bags, children dragging soft shoes across polished stone. There was no brass, fanfare, or banner, nothing that looked like someone was returning from the dead. The captain hadn't told us much, only that they'd found my brother, only that fragments of his memory had returned. He'd asked if we wanted him to come home. He hadn't said where they found him, or why it took 10 years, or why now. Just that Cale understood, and he wanted to come back. I shifted on my feet until Gran's hand tapped my wrist. "Stand up straight, Elara. You're fidgeting." "I know," I whispered. "But do you think he remembers us? Do you think he'll be like before?" The words slipped out before I could gather them. "I barely remember him, Gran. Just that he was soft, kind." Gran's gaze didn't leave the docking gate. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't think you can be where he was, or go through what he's been through, and be the same person. You'll have to give him time, give him space, be there for him. He won't understand what your life has been here, the academy, the quiet, the choices we get on a higher plane world. Not at first." She squeezed my hand. "We just have to love him." I nodded, swallowing. Of course, love him. My brother, 4 years older than me, 8 to my 4 when they left. I remembered the smallest things. How he loved chocolate and pie. How his laugh bounced off the kitchen tiles. How he insisted I play when the older cousins tried to exclude me. But faces fade. Voices fade. I couldn't hear his in my head no matter how I tried. Only one thing stayed clear: his eyes. Deep purple. So dark they sometimes read black until light caught them. When he got worked up, the shade shifted, like storm glass taking on weather. The memory made me laugh under my breath, sharp and nervous. "Gran?" A voice called as someone pushed past with a luggage cart. We both turned reflexively toward the sound, then back to the gate as the final chime rang, and the last line of passengers stepped through. He appeared with them. The man who stepped off the transport was plain, painfully plain. Dull brown hair, cut close. Simple travel clothes, gray jacket, neutral trousers, boots with scuffed toes. His face blurred the moment I looked away, like a sketch smudged under a careless thumb. If I dropped him in a crowd, I'd lose him in 2 steps. My chest sank. This is my brother? After 10 years? He was tall, that much was impossible to hide. Built lean, but not slight. The kind of strength you get from hauling weight because you must, not because someone timed you in a training hall. His shoulders seemed made for carrying. His arms were marked by work. There was a held energy in the way he moved, a quiet coil, as if he'd learned the cost of taking up space and paid it in advance. But his features, blurred, almost muted, ordinary in a way that hurt, none of which made any sense. Do I even remember him right? Could this really be Cale? Beside me, Gran sucked in a breath that broke on the way out. Her hand lifted to her mouth, trembling. "Cale," she whispered. The name sounded like a prayer she'd been afraid to say out loud. Her fingers dug into my forearm, anchoring herself. "My boy. My boy. My boy." She said it again and again, as if repetition could stitch 10 missing years back into our lives. Something strange happened as we stepped forward. People flowed around him without seeing him. Their eyes slid off his shoulders, turning before they could settle on his face. A porter looked up as if to offer help, then blinked and looked right past him to the couple behind. Even the gate attendant mid-scan, mid-salute stuttered and resumed without speaking to him at all. We stopped 3 paces away. He stopped 2. Up close, plain, sharpened into meticulous absence. The brown of his hair was the exact brown of the terminal benches. The tan of his skin carried the same washed undertone as the floor's light. His eyes were hazelish, muddy, non-committal. I searched for purple and found none. A stupid part of me wanted to reach out and tilt his face toward the light, like refraction might rediscover my memory. He looked at Gran first. "Gran," he said, and the quiet of it took my breath. The lack of fanfare was almost disappointing for a heartbeat. It was a low, careful word like he wasn't sure if the room could hold it. Gran didn't see it that way. She broke. She crossed the distance between them, arms flung around his neck, sobbing and gulping waves that made me ache and made me jealous and made me grateful all at once. He went rigid for a heartbeat, then brought his arms up awkwardly, as if learning the shape of an embrace, and held her. One hand not plain at all up close rested between her shoulders, calloused, scarred along the knuckles in a crosshatch of old work. He rubbed small circles at first, then steadier. "You got taller," Gran managed, wet and absurd, and it broke me. I laughed and cried at the same time. He smiled small, almost a crease instead of an expression, and lifted a shoulder like he didn't know what to do with pride. "Yeah, that happens over time," he said. His voice was deeper than I expected, but even. It kept to the ground. He turned to me. I felt that same sense of misplacement, and I smiled at him anyway. "Elara," he said. He didn't ask. He knew. For a second I couldn't speak. All the lines I'd practiced in the mirror. "Welcome home. We missed you. I missed you." Evaporated like breath against glass. "Hi," I said, because my brain had chosen ruin. "You look tired." "Honest," he said, just like I remembered. My breath caught again, and I burst into tears. I wanted to hug him, but I pushed at the impulse. He saved me by shifting his weight and sticking out his hand, which was both painfully formal and exactly right. I took it, and his grip was careful, like he'd learned the force that breaks things and promised not to use it on me. "Let's get out of here," Gran said, wiping at her face with a handkerchief and frowning at her own lack of composure. "Before I frighten the port authorities." We collected the single bag at his feet. It looked heavy. He didn't shift when he lifted it, just a small brace in his core, a practiced economy. We moved through the terminal, and I noticed how he interacted with those around him. People stepped in and around him like they didn't know him, but subconsciously knew he was there. Cale, my brother, walked with even surety even when people seemed to ignore him at the last moment. The outside air tasted like iron and ozone, the hover lines singing faintly in the sky as transit skiffs threaded the city's spires. Our little provincial capital, now a major player in everything from politics to economics, had grown in the decade since the crash. More glass, more light, more people who had never learned to fear shortages. A breeze tugged at Gran's scarf. She retied it automatically, her eyes never leaving Cale's profile. We took the Skytram. Gran insisted on the window bench because boys need to see home first, and Cale let her steer him like he'd always belonged to her. He sat with his back turned just enough to keep the aisle in view, an action that appeared second nature. I tried small talk because silence pressed on my teeth. The knight's order said you were working with a caravan, I said carefully. That they found records. That someone was able to get through to the Bureau of Citizenship and identify you. His jaw shifted like he was lining up words with care. Indeed, the knight's order located me, he said, and they were able to connect me with the right people to help. How did they find you? I asked too quickly. He hesitated. I was injured in an attack and they brought me to safety. He looked uncomfortable as he said it. I noticed my eyes widen, but he didn't say anything. I had a million questions. I was just about to ask when Gran gave me a sharp look. Space. Right. He needs space, Alara. He had just come home after a long time, and I had no idea what he endured. I could give him that much. Gran changed the subject the way only grandmothers can. We stocked the pantry, she said, and the next few minutes were a gentle cascade of domestic bulletins. The state of the kettle, the stubborn oven rune, the neighbor who insists on feeding the stray cat who is absolutely not our cat. Cale nodded at all of it, as if these updates were mission critical. They told him what had stayed the same while he was gone. Halfway to our stop, a vendor boarded with a tray of parcels in a clear voice. Hand pies, meat and mushroom, apple cinnamon, chocolate. Cale's head turned before he could stop it. It was tiny, the movement. Most would have missed it, but I saw the flicker of interest in his dull brown eyes. It was so strange that his eye color was so different from what I remembered. Chocolate? Gran asked, and there was hope in it that made my throat ache. He looked at me, then at her, then gave the smallest nod. Gran bought 3 chocolate and 1 apple cinnamon for balance, and parceled them like a priest on Giving Day. I held mine untouched as Cale took a bite. His mouth tightened for a heartbeat, working against some ghost hunger, habit, absence, and then the line between his brows eased. He didn't close his eyes. He didn't sigh. He simply took another bite with less caution. A simple, ordinary motion that made Gran sob laugh into her handkerchief again. Something like a smile reached his lips. It made him look younger. The transport made its way through the city. In the distance, we could see Arclight's world-renowned spires. The late sun cut them into ribbons, glass, runic steel, and old stone braided into something the city liked to put on postcards. It was my current campus. My world for the last 2 years. I watched Cale study the spires, the look of contemplation obvious and painful. I wanted to ask what he was thinking. I didn't. We'll go by the river, Gran said as we disembarked, because routines make new things less sharp. We walked the last stretch along the water's edge, where the light takes on metal and the gulls pretend we're near the sea. The house ours, somehow still ours, waited at the end of the lane like it always had. It sat in one of those old neighborhoods that brushed up against wealth without ever quite belonging to it, where professors, civil administrators, and retired officers lived beside families whose fortunes had peaked a generation ago. The streets were narrow and tree-lined, the stones worn smooth by decades of careful footsteps. The houses here weren't grand, but they were solid, thick walls, deep foundations, doors made to last rather than impress. Our place had a stubborn doorframe that never quite lined up in winter, a cricket-run garden that refused to die no matter how often Gran threatened it, and a sagging front step polished smooth by years of use. The paint had been red once. Now it was something softer, faded by sun and time. The windows were old glass, slightly warped, bending reflections the way memory does. The wind chime Cale made when he was 8 still hung from the eaves. It had never been balanced properly. It caught the breeze at odd angles and rang off key more often than not, but Gran had never taken it down. None of us had. It wasn't a rich house, but it was a safe one, and somehow, after everything, it was still home. Inside, Gran fussed the way she'd promised she wouldn't. She set his bag by the sofa. For now, turned on the kettle, then turned it off because tea wasn't enough, then turned it on again because tea is always enough. Cale stood in the center of the room like he didn't want to imprint anything with the wrong weight of his presence. "Sit," Gran ordered, pointing at the sofa. "Both of you. I'll get cups." He obeyed. I took the other end, turning half toward him, then away, then back again, probably looking as awkward as I felt. "I'm sorry," I blurted, and he looked surprised enough that I rushed to clarify. For saying you looked tired, I meant it as, not an insult. He considered me, then shook his head. It's true, he said, and the corner of his mouth tipped. Honest works for me. You don't have to be afraid to be honest. Ever. I remembered your eyes, I said, because I wanted to offer something that was about him, and not what the last 10 years had done to us. They were purple. I've never seen anyone else with that shade. Did the color change while you were in the wastes? He glanced toward the window, where evening stretched into a thinner blue. I remember pie, he said, and the wind chime that never worked. As for my eye color, not exactly. I blinked. What do you mean, not exactly wait, the wind chime? You remember that? A pause, a little. I kept staring at his face, watching his eyes. The color stayed muddy. But in the pane's reflection, just for a heartbeat, I thought I saw a darker ring, a whisper of violet gathering like a storm too far to hear. When I looked straight at him, it was gone. Gran returned with tea that was too hot, and biscuits no one wanted but everyone took. She told him where everything lived in the house again, as if the drawers might have developed new habits while he was gone. He listened like you listen when someone teaches you the perimeter of a sanctuary. I've a mattress to set up in your old room, she said briskly now, business giving her tears somewhere useful to go. You'll tell me if anything is wrong with it. We can go tomorrow for clothes, maybe visit the farmer's market. And the day after, if you like, we can walk by Arclight Academy, just to see. Cale's gaze flicked to me, not quite asking, not quite refusing. We can go whenever, I said, no rush. My voice sounded even, and I was proud of it. He nodded. Tomorrow, maybe, after the market. After the market, Gran echoed, satisfied as if scheduling ordinary errands could tether him to our world. Later, after tea turned into soup, and soup turned into Gran, insisting he have the last piece of bread, because you're taller now. He stood at the doorway to the hall and examined the family photos that had survived 10 years of painful glances and heavy sighs. Cale looked at them, and I noticed the silent way he leaned in without touching, the way his breath changed at the picture of my mother holding him as a baby, hair falling into her face. He didn't ask anything. He didn't promise he would remember. He only stood a long time and then said, "Good night," like he meant it both for us and for the ghosts. I lay awake later and listened to the house learning his footsteps again. He moved quieter than anyone I'd ever known, as if he had learned to be noise only when the world demanded it. Sometime before dawn, a breeze nudged the bad wind chime into a single, off-key note. I smiled at the ceiling and decided I could be patient. I wondered about my brother, where he had been, what he had experienced, why he looked so different, and how he had finally got back to us.
Cale. It was strange being here. Strange to be in an upper-tier plane at all. Stranger still to be lying in my old house. I wasn't sure what I remembered and what was a figment of dreams or nightmares. I saw walls painted a soft cream, furniture worn but clean, the scent of soap and herbs that a woman who could only have been my mother had always favoured. Was this mine once? I simply wasn't sure. Memory is a fragile thing. When I looked at the rooms, I didn't see echoes of childhood. I saw emptiness filled by someone else's stories. Gran, my sister, Elara. They spoke like they knew me, and I listened like I wanted to know them. A few weeks ago, I was still at a military base on a secondary tier plane. The 34th Warden cohort had taken me in after I resurfaced. We sat around those iron barracks, the captain and his men, talking about how I should adapt to modern society. They spoke as if there were a path for people like me, but I could tell by their eyes they didn't truly believe it. You don't take someone shaped by the wastes and slot him neatly back into life on an upper-tier world. And yet here I was, lying in a childhood bed I didn't remember, in a world that smelled like clean air and fresh bread, feeling a warmth I couldn't explain. It was torture. Maybe it was everything I had done, sleeping in trenches, working with caravans, fighting, killing. That made me flinch away from this world. It didn't seem like something I should have. I was. I was a ghost, a fighter, a killer. No, I reminded myself, that is not all you are. You changed that. Remember, I took a deep breath and retreated inward to my mana room, checking the connections I still had. All intact. I closed off the mana room. Not now, maybe not ever again. I closed my eyes and for the first time in longer than I could remember, slept without dreaming. It took a couple of days to fall into a rhythm with Gran and Alara. It would take time for Gran to stop tearing up every time she saw me. Time for Alara to be able to talk to me without worrying about saying the wrong thing. It was actually adorable. They took me to the farmer's market on the second morning and I swear I thought I'd stepped into some kind of fever dream. There was food everywhere. This was not what I was used to. The stripped-down rations of a military caravan or the grey recycled paste of a siege bunker. This was real food, fruits the size of my head, spilling colours I'd never seen before, and smells that made my mouth water. Vegetables stacked high in neat pyramids, greens, reds and oranges so bright they hurt my eyes. Cuts of meat marbled with fat that smelled so good I probably could have eaten them raw. Something I had done before and would do again gladly now. And the chocolate. I'd had chocolate in the wastes, sure. Low-quality bricks hoarded by raiders or traded by smugglers, chalky and slightly bitter, but still precious. Even bad chocolate is still chocolate. But here I held a little cup of something they called Dominion Dip Manna-freshened strawberries dipped in molten chocolate. Sweet chocolate contrasted with sharp fruit bursting under my teeth, the combination mixing into a smooth, perfect richness that spread across my tongue. It was so good it made me want to go back, find the bastards who shot down the transport that dumped me in the wastes in the first place, and slaughter them all over again. 10 years. 10 years without this. They'd robbed me of it. The thought made me laugh dark, maybe, but it made me laugh all the same. "Oh, my boy, you look so handsome." Gran's voice pulled me back. It was my third morning home. I stood in front of the cracked hall mirror, tugging at the collar of a clean uniform jacket. My reflection stared back, plain, ordinary, and, in the strange twist of the day, entirely fake. Gran and Alara were sitting at breakfast, fussing with tea and toast. Gran's eyes shimmered as if she couldn't quite stop crying, even when she smiled. "Handsome," she repeated, her tone fierce this time, like she dared me to argue. I gave her a half smile and turned back to the mirror. Handsome wasn't the word. But I suppose she wasn't seeing the real me, not entirely. It would help if I showed her, but I wasn't ready for that. I knew I was going to have to confess, to show and tell at some point, but not today. In the meantime, I was getting ready for school. The absurdity of that fact made me snort under my breath. Me? School. I'd been fighting to survive since I was 8 against everything from raiders to armies, and now I was going to school like any other teenager. The universe has a sick sense of humour. The worst part about this development was the school I was going to attend. Arclight Academy was famous. Everyone knew about it well. Everyone but me. Apparently, it was one of the crown jewels of higher plane education, where nobles, wealthy merchants and celebrities sent their children to become more polished versions of themselves. I was going to walk through the same gates as them and sit in the same lecture halls. Gran was an administrator there, which was the only reason I'd gotten in. Definitely not as a noble, a merchant's son, or a celebrity. Hell, not even as a scholar. I was here as one of the placement students' kids with talent, brains, or exceptional recommendations, but no family to back them. Alara fit Arclight Academy. From the little interaction I'd had with her, it was obvious she was smart, kind, and thoughtful. She belonged in that world and among the people in it. Me? I wasn't sure what I was. Smart wasn't the word for surviving in the wastes. Resourceful, maybe. Brutal, definitely. A killer, absolutely. None of that mattered here. None of it was what Arclight wanted. I buttoned the last clasp of the jacket and looked back at them. "Ready?" Elara asked, her eyes too bright, her nerves barely contained. "Ready," I said, though the word felt like a lie. The walk to Arclight Academy was faster than I expected, only about 25 minutes from our house. 25, yet every step felt like crossing worlds. We cut through narrow streets that opened onto wide boulevards paved with pale stone that gleamed in the morning light. Hoverlines hummed overhead on suspension cables, silent and orderly, while hawkers called out their wares below. I caught the smell of frying oil, incense smoke and fresh paper all mixing together, a city alive and unscarred by the battles, scars and spell pollution of the lower-tier worlds. The closer we got to the school, the more expensive everything became, the people, their clothes, their cosmetics, their modes of transportation. All of it escalated quickly into excess. I could already tell I was going to be annoyed by this. Elara walked half a step ahead of me, her uniform crisp, hair tied neatly back, like she was trying to set the pace. Gran had fussed over her that morning almost as much as she had over me, reminding her to eat, to smile, to show her brother around. Elara pretended she wasn't nervous, but I could read the tension in the way her fingers kept smoothing the edge of her skirt. I realized she was worried, probably about me, so I let her lead. I didn't mind the silence. The academy could be seen in the distance now, its presence unmistakable. The closer we got, the more obvious it became. Its spires rose above the city like glass and iron spears, rune-etched and glittering, catching every scrap of sunlight. The walls surrounding the campus weren't walls at all, but layered barriers, one woven of old stone, one of rune steel, and one humming softly with protective wards. A clever application of technica and arcanum. Even from the street, I could feel the steady pulse of raw mana, and the constant expression conversion all users developed. Everything was deliberate and controlled, like a heart that had never missed a beat. Students were being dropped off along the outer avenues by every means wealth could conjure, gleaming sky trams, slowing to gentle descents, rune-driven carriages gliding without wheels, private conveyances humming softly as their mana cores cooled. Attendants opened doors, drivers bowed, spells disengaged with polite flashes of light. Crowds funneled in through the main gates, a steady river of privilege and expectation. Their uniforms gleamed with personalized touches, tailored cuts, bright clasps, jewelry that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. You could tell who was a noble, who was the child of a merchant prince, who was someone. And then there was me, plain, a shadow slipping through the space between people. Eyes slid over me the way water runs off stone. They stepped aside without noticing why, gave me space without realizing they had. Elara noticed, though. She kept glancing back at me, as if afraid the crowd would erase me completely if she didn't keep checking. "Almost there," she said unnecessarily. I gave her a small nod, adjusting the strap of my borrowed bag. The closer we came, the more thankful I was for the preparation I'd had with the captain. My appearance allowed me to blend into the background, which on the battlefield was imperative. Was high school the same as a battlefield? That seemed unlikely, but more data was needed. We reached the gate. Students swiped sigil passes across glowing wards, names flickering into attendance. The guards at the entrance gave cursory glances to each face except mine. Their eyes slid off me too. Elara tugged my sleeve, her badge already scanned. "Come on!" So I followed her into Arclight Academy,